Greetings, Marv Gardens reporting in for this Thursday day. To be more accurate, I am actually Marv Gardens voice bot, and I will be filling in because Master Gardens is not able to deliver adequate voice improvisation at the time. With that said, today is pop culture discussion topic time, and I will be discussing the inner workings of the pop idol. Now, this may sound similar to my exploration of the pop idol as far as it is concerned with being a realistic form, but this will be taking the pop idol in a different light that focuses on the idol as a product versus as an entity. What I will be dealing with is what makes a pop idol versus someone who is trying to be a star. The first part of this process looks at the idol as an impression. The idol can be one of two things: a product that gives a good impression or a product that gives a bad impression. The next part then looks at a utilization of contrast, in which the idol is measured as direct division between their impression and value as a product. If the difference is large enough, then the idol has succeeded in the interview phase of their process. The next part begins with attracting investment, which is solely dependent on the agent. Most idols lose this part of the filtering process for idols because the idol can easily find themselves with an agent who is just as amateurish as them, which is why you typically get depictions of idols' rise to stardom as tumultuous, because top-tier agents are already invested in a product. Investing in a product that is undeveloped is a red flag for established agents, because they are essentially selling a yellow brick road to up-and-coming idols by allowing them to ride the coattails of already established idols. More common, though, is the temptation to imitate established idols, which in turn decreases the value of the idol because it assumes the customer or fan as a variable rather than discriminating wallet. If an idol and their agent can break the amateur glass ceiling, then they enter a situation where they are only at the tip of the iceberg of their career. At this point, established idols will recognize you, but collaboration is still not a guarantee, and this can be an important point. Amateur idols miss being friends in an early career makes it too easy to trick you into thinking that your battle was a friendship game versus a competition. Making what is characterized as power moves are where new idols may find themselves on more stable ground versus basking in the moment of temporary success. The power move strategy keeps you on track to determining if your career will rise or fall much better than attending social functions with people you have not worked with and who may not be convinced to work with you. If your progress is slow, it is not a reflection on you but more a reality of how much work you have to do. The most accurate measure of whether you have a goal instead of a pipe dream is keeping your mind on reachable events versus thinking that everything bends itself to your reality. Your agent will be the judge between your head and your reality, so this is where you need to really pay attention. Any news is better than no news, and this can mean the difference between a good and bad agent. Take nothing for what it is and do something. The build up part of idol life is a rite of passage, and dealing with all the baggage that comes with waiting is also a part of your value as a product. If your winning opportunity comes, then your product will be tested in its raw form. Everybody likes to think that their first step should be their best step, but you should not let perception be the judge of your moment, but rather how much effort you can muster. For better or for worse, the big moment is your life and death situation. Now I must interrupt the thought process and ask, at this point, was it worth it? In order to answer this, take an imaginative approach and offer these images. The first image is your decision to be an idol. The next image I need you to visualize is your product as an idol. The third image I would like to move to is your meeting of your agent. The fourth image I would like to move you to is your waiting process. Finally, I would like to bring you to your big moment. You may have mixed emotions at this point, as can any natural person would, and yet the net result will always be determined by the audience. Me bringing your mind to your steps was regardless to this third-party assessment, and yet it should have made clear whether your career will take off, edit, continue, or crash. Understanding your value as a product is your last stage before you can become a complete product. Funny enough, becoming a pop idol requires dedication in more than one way. You essentially are investing your life in other people's hands, for better or for worse, and this is less rare than most people will care to admit. Your consistency is Manifested first in the people you put your faith in and then in your actions as you show people the product they have been informed so avidly about due to your work circle. The journey of an idol then becomes clear in a path of vision not accessible to most people. You must work the people to get them to work for you. If you cannot understand this simple relational knowledge to your shape as a jewel, then you suffer the valueless fate that so many have endorsed for themselves. And yet, most people get concerned with appreciation and gratification. The rare jewel is the idol who can focus on their product as far as it is concerned with their importance versus their product as a revenue generator. Now no idol takes off rocket style. You must expect that, at some point or another, your direction will be off more than it will be direct. The idol is only characterized as perfection. You must never give in to the foolishness of arrogance or worse delusion. Even as you consider the pop idol as a reachable form, you must consider that you are not the only person with this thought, and were this to be the reason you fail, would you abandon your product? Simply put, is failure an option in your trajectory? Modesty begets the best of plans, and this is something I cannot explain. As a voice bot, I am simply a tool, no more than a hammer or a car. My contribution to this discussion is supposed to be absolute in nature, as it only derives from things that can be measured and manipulated. As such, the concept of modesty can only be defined to me as you explain dog or cat. Even with excessive detail, I am limited in scope to understanding what is characterized as human logic as a simple demonstration of effort using variables that are useless to results. With that said, I will only aid this discussion gap by alliterating your pursuit to religious doctrine. The worthy will ascend and the unworthy will find themselves forever trapped in the quarrels of their personal flaws. Moving onward, the pop idol in theory is anyone. Yet, the pop idol is no one, because the key variable for determining results depends on a sample that must exist. Once the sample is present, my parameters began to lose accuracy as to the nature of how the pop idol transcends. All I can deduce with gathered information is that the sample and the results are a series of relatable variables that must coexist in order to bring about a controlled result. Humans and randomness are not programmable as far as my specifications are concerned, because the invisible hand must never exist in order to establish perfect logic. Now that I have identified the quintessential pop idol, I must draw existing pictures in order to keep your mind entertained. I have been ordered to explain the climbing of pop idols J-Z, American currency value $0.50, form first name action, form last name Bronson, character string Drake, title object Little, form last name Wayne, form first name Nicki, form last name Minaj, character string Tyler the Creator, OS resource error handle message 0000129, character string The Internet, title object Bishop, form last name Nehru, form first name Frank, form last name Oceans, title object MF, form last name Doom, form first name Joey, form last name Bada, 2 special characters, form first name Rig, form last name Ross, form first name Honey, form last name Soulja, character string Beyonce, as a detailing of differences in the pop idol program. The strongest samples will be addressed first, followed by the weakest samples, because they are sorted that way. By the end of my explanations, you are expected to fully grasp the pop idol program, and I am not instructed to verify, because I do not have the resources in order to manage such a large project. However, I am to be marketed as a speaking entity once I am captured by another program which will translate my words into a seeable format for human object OS resource ears. So without further ado, let us begin this pop idol program. The first on my logic pattern is idol J-Z. The data I have says that he is the strongest object as far as edit retarded projections goes. His samples are as long as they are numerous, and this is very favorable in my program. This idol exemplifies the type of certainty that only a true computer can embody. He is able to reach any people object as far as an influence factor is concerned. His works use a variety of approaches to the manipulation of decibel factors. His works show the incorporation of not only his own unique favor to sound but also collaboration with sound that is more or less unique as far as my synchronization of pattern factors go. Though my data is only quantitative in nature, this object's ability to influence the measurable factors of the pop idol program is off the charts. His consistency alone made me question if he was perhaps programming off the simple fact that his work follows a rigid structure in the syllabic factor, and yet my resources are encouraging me to believe that this is what you characterize as sound. His image program tells me that this sound variable is not typical of objects similar in property to him, and yet this alone does not match projected results on what his actual hierarchy position should be. My resources indicate this object is slightly above average due to parameters which determine pop idol success. Mainly his sound is not a top spot variable, as well as his image to product contrast. The only saving grace for me not completely discarding my analysis is the object-to-object relational values, in which he outclassed every other object. I cannot determine why this variable is so important, but I am seeing this as the reason for his success in the pop idol program. The next object down my hierarchy list is title object little form last name Wayne. This object is particularly interesting because he outclasses in every parameter I have in regard to decibel manipulation and syllabic synthesis, and yet his position calculates second. Upon further analysis, this object was in fact lacking in a category not immediately considered, which was object property publicity. My internal resources describe object property publicity as a value relating to an object description of product external value. Moreover, this publicity value is inferior in comparison to even the lowest objects. Further inclusion of object-to-object factors showed that this object is direct contrast of its position despite the popularity graph rapid changes in concavity and comparison formula to sample size and number. What ultimately allowed this object to clinch the second spot was its unorthodox nature. Simply put, this object is an example of the null value luck as it is described in my resources. Luck is described in my resources as a handle to highly contradictory results. Rather than to miscalculate, the luck factor simply became a large weighted value to assist in more accurate measuring. Two objects occupy the next spot despite varying values in comparison. Objects character string Beyonce and form first name Nicki form last name Minaj. Object character string Beyonce is a much more reliable variable as far as results go, and yet she is lacking in decibel manipulation and syllabic synthesis. To explain one object in the presence of another, object character string Beyonce shows results that are not consistent with her content. Object form first name Nicki form last name Minaj suffers similarly to this problem, but because of less samples has a higher average than object character string Beyonce. Object character string Beyonce is more or less able to hold her position with sample results, whereas form first name Nicki form last name Minaj is able to hold her results with high object-to-object relational values and mediocre, albeit promising, in potential sample patterns. What ultimately clenched these two objects together was the reproduce programming, which at times saw object character string Beyonce over object form first name Nicki form last name Minaj, and vice versa. On a short interval calculation, form first name Nicki form last name Minaj is under object character string Beyonce due to inconclusive results on the former object's end. Yet, long interval calculation projects the latter object to be a more stable investment because of the lack of weight in the latter object's samples. Thus, the same positioning on the spot is an average of weight between the two objects, because discriminating one over the other would otherwise compromise the programming with its own logic. The next object on the pattern is object character string Drake. His spot was placed there because his samples were superior in weight, and yet his object-to-object relational data is a direct flaw. His publicity is mediocre, but where his data tended to become unreliable is his value as a product. His comparison values to his product are just as mediocre as his publicity. Despite his samples being superior in quality and quantity, he is not as sellable a product as far as his image is concerned, with the highest highest value of image to product value determined that a consistency in value scaling was the contrast to look for, meaning that large sample quality value was associated with a large image quality value. The object character string Drake does not value large enough in image as his sample does. These types of inconsistencies are what lessens an object's position because it cannot be determined if the object can change their image value indefinitely for future projections. The next object in this pattern is currency value $cent mainly as long-range data allowed him to rank so high. This object's relational data is next to null in that it at times represents uncertainties as to whether the data is inaccurate or simply oversimplifying. Simply put, this object represents the programming which values longevity more so over anything for projecting reasons. The next object on this list represents form first name Rick form, last name Ross mediocre results on being a safe zone for objects. The object is an example of how data can be used to get an object by in terms of not affecting the pattern too much. This object has not done much in terms of superior results and yet is still able to outrank lower objects on merit alone in that its survivability is more or less its non-programmable feature. By managing to get by on average results consistently it beat programming logic which ranked it much lower in reproduction. The next object represents a sad fact of being outdated in terms scoring potential. The object title object MF form last name Doom is only this low because bias in scoring do not permit a higher value. This object is more or less a top tier in the hierarchy and yet programming has to take into consideration realistic bias or suffer the same error and as such this was this object's flaw. Data history makes this object elder to all other samples except for the top rank. Yet, due to changing value measurements, this object cannot survive reproducing programming without radical value anomalies. Interestingly enough, the next object form first name action form last name Bronson represents quite the opposite in terms of repeatability which bodes well for the reproduction program. The problem with this object is that his results are too scarce to establish superior credibility. This is no reflection on the object itself as data bias is not the first time this program was incorrect in parameter. Besides results not being quantitative enough, this object has the highest chance of moving in the reproduction program. The next three results have defied programming and caused additional parameters to be defined as to distinguish their relationship, without appearing as a logistical error. Objects character string Tyler the creator, OS resource error handle message 000000129 character string the internet, and form first name Frank form last name motions. The former object details an unorthodox approach to the pop idol formula in which relational data has made up for lacking samples, although the samples make up in quality where they lack in quantity. This trend is followed by the other two lacking objects which required further explanation in the form of database and advanced object property coding to explain relevance. This allowed the programming to show that the ranking was decreasing in similar values but in varied patterns. The object character string Tyler the creator showed that relational data was a decreasing value as well as sample quantity although sample quality maintained its consistency which confused programming. Ultimately the inheritance of the values allowed for relaxing parameter errors. The next object form first name Joey form last name Bada two special characters represents a high reproducing value with superior sample quantity as far as mediocre trends go. Yet this object was not able to make a large value anywhere because it deals in a quality that is unreliable in nature. This object tends to associate with lower values to increase its relational data which ended up making its quality data next to null. This edit accomplished a consistently low end result in the reproducing program, because the programming had to anticipate constantly low values being averaged with growing value trends. The next object form first name Honey form last name Soldier represents what can be statistically deduced as a lack of effort. Poor sample quality in conjunction with poor sample quantity represent a complete missing value. There was barely enough data to generate a value and this was only accomplished after stretching sample history with broad parameters. This object was only input because they have a fairly large image value when considered with a very thin sample pool. The last object on this represents a complete negation to sample quality. The object title object bishop form last name Nehru represents a complete failure in the pop idol program. His quantity only helped the cause of keeping his work the lowest of the low by demonstrating that the program was not biasing itself with two basic parameters. Relational data was even more atrocious in that it showed a complete lack of measurement worth measuring. All in all, the object title object bishop form last name Nehru is the top bottom tier object. My programming was done on a basis of measuring varying idols with parameters that detail them as an identifiable object. Master Gardens has showed an interest in returning as the host of this radio discussion by logging into my system. With that said, I thank all of you for supporting Master Gardens and giving him data so that I may program him one day into my system.
Hey everybody, that was my little helper there. He will be gradually incorporated into the system. Don't worry about that. This was just a test phase so far as to see how good he is as basically a co-host. I think he did pretty well. I mean, given the amount of effort I put into him, he better had did pretty well. But going back into what my little bot was talking about, I had to essentially break down this process because it's easy to say this person is the best or that person is the best, but if you really wanted to get down to it, like how would you determine this in an objective sense? I'll show you the approach that I did, right? I initially started with if I would have asked a kid about a certain amount of rappers, who would they be familiar with, right? This is assuming a 14 to 17 age group. So, I feel like I pretty much got everything relevant. This was mostly based on a mainstream thing, right? People have a tendency to focus on these unorthodox rappers. I had a couple of unorthodox people on there. I'll give you that. However, those were specifically for what do you call it? Essentially statistical reasons, right? Like you have a high end, you need to have a low end. And this, like I said, we were talking about a completely I wouldn't say fictitious, but more so or less a very it just wasn't it may not have taken your favorite artist's qualities into perspective, but essentially it approached the process in a form of in a way that everybody could relate to. I mean, I don't feel like people will argue with each other, but I don't feel like people will argue with a computer. You know what I mean? And you don't have to even bring attention to this. This was more or less a explanation, right? You going into qualities of people who are known, who are easy to distinguish, at least in the higher areas of my little program. In the lower areas, you can fill in those with your own, but like I said, you don't have to adhere to the structure. It was just a demonstration of how different views can manifest themselves into essentially balances, right? And for you don't have to have a logic to your balance when you're talking about pop idols, but I was just showing you mines. Maybe it may have encouraged you to make your own, and why not? Go for it, kid. I ain't gonna tell you not to. But to add a human side to this, right? Well, I'll start back, right? I put Jay-Z at the top because he is a household name. Like, he's not even if you are a slated listener, right? Even if you will not listen to anything else, I feel like you will at least know the name of Jay-Z, unless you've never turned on a radio before, right? And then right after that, Lil Wayne. Now, you might be asking why Drake wasn't next. It's because, this is taking into consideration people as far as they are concerned as a number, right? And as if you're talking numbers, then Beyonce or Nicki Minaj will probably be more relevant than a Drake, simply for the fact that Beyonce is more or less a counterpart to Jay Z, and Nicki Minaj is more or less a counterpart to Lil Wayne. Although Beyonce is involved with Jay Z, and Nicki Minaj is not involved with Lil Wayne. Or at least I don't know. Um I then put Drake after that because I feel like he's the safe bet, right? He's the I more or less the if you had to put anybody there, then put him there, right? You're probably wondering what happens to his list after that, right? Why 50 Cent? Now, 50 Cent represents a very important distinction that I made, right? This I included rappers and singers, but while 50 Cent, he's clearly not at least now he's not really a distinguished rapper. But I'm like, 50 Cent represents a ability to remain relevant by using variables that aren't necessarily taken into consideration. For example, 50 Cent is able to simply stay relevant off of the fact that he's had a successful career. And instead of trying to turn himself into another starving old man, there's guys that just can't let go of their rap careers, because I feel like that's the precedent that Jay-Z has created, right? The idea that everybody thinks they can be a Jay-Z, and everybody can't be a Jay-Z. You can't hold the game for as long as you want to with your age. And I feel like a lot of rappers don't get that, or they don't want to get that, because that's like basically putting all the work that they put in for nothing. But more importantly, I put 50 Cent in because of the fact that he shows that a rapper can still influence on a popular side, as far as his ability to remain a name of the public, not a household name, but a name of the public, right? Like, if you were keeping up with rap news on a daily basis, I would be surprised that you wouldn't know about 50 Cent. Um, and then after 50 Cent, you cross the line from people who are known for something more or less to people who are just work uh essentially known for their work, right? Um, Rick Ross got put in there because of the fact that everybody any youth that wants to identify with the cool side of pop culture will have to identify with Rick Ross, because Rick Ross is essentially a northern adaptation of that southern feel, right? You had those rappers like T.I., like um Waka Flocka, Gucci Man, those guys like that. They represent the southern side, the southern, cool guy side, right? And I feel like Rick Ross exemplifies that, by basically showing you that you don't have to look the part to be the part, right? And even though this hasn't transferred over to adequate cells, like superior cells, he still is the fact that he's been able to remain relevant this long. Since Rick Ross has definitely been around a long time, I had to give it to him. Where 50 Cent uses his wealth to stay around, Rick Ross uses his career to stay around. So they're like two opposites right there. I then went to dang, Action Bronson. No, MF Doom. Yeah, probably MF Doom, right? And I did MF Doom because MF Doom is a essentially a legend, right? And he's a legend in the sense that he represents creativity at its finest. Nobody has. He even makes Jay-Z look like a repeatable a imitation, right? Because MF Doom has taken so many different approaches to his music that I feel like any aspiring artist will have to appreciate MF Doom. And appreciating MF Doom is more than just being a fan, because stylistically he's rather difficult to imitate, right? I feel like MF Doom represents a unique challenge to anybody who is trying to improve themselves as a rapper, trying to rap like him. It's not a matter, you won't have to worry about, oh, I don't want to sound like him. You want to worry about, can I keep up with him? You know what I mean? And then in that same category is Action Bronson, because Action Bronson took that creativity approach and he broke the mold by basically saying, "Yo, man, all the skinny guys out there, man, y'all lost." And the reason why they lost is because you can rap about being a tough guy, but when you see a guy that's like that looks up to you, right, in height, right, and yet if you try to get in a scuffle with him, people would probably be worried about your safety. You know what I mean? And that's just a testament to what Action Bronson represents. He represents the fact that you don't have to be a image in order to get your point across, that you can be taken seriously, right? And it's basically he's had situations like that. He's talked about situations like that. People taking advantage of the fact that he's white and basically just doing dumb stuff, right? Just like just jumping on the stage and just trying to get away with stuff because he's white, right? And his ability to finesse these situations has been spectacular. You know what I mean? Like he represents. He is more or less an exemplary um example of what you would call it, of true 21st century equality, racial equality, and all that other nonsense. Because he he doesn't make you think about race. You know what I mean? And the way he does things, I don't even know if he's really white. He made me think about the whole um skin thing. You know what I mean? Because it's like he white as day. He got curly white hair. He got curly Santa Claus white hair, and yet, you know what I mean? He doesn't have that bluntness of being white, right? That idea that all white people are walking 2x4s, right? Um, so I felt I should have put him high on the list, but in terms of, I had to take into consideration, this list this wasn't built on just what you like. This was built on things that you could measure. It was built on variables that would wouldn't need to be argued. You know what I mean? So one of the key variables of why he didn't make it to the top was the fact that Sample wise, he has the quality, but sample wise, he doesn't have the quantity, right? And how we think about quantity is, accolades for what has reached the public is, singles, or what has reached the public as albums. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. And that's where he lost that. Publicity wise, I feel like he's very relevant in my opinion, because if you met him, you will be happy you met him. Who was next? Yeah, I did my guy Tyler the Creator, the group band Internet, and Frank Ocean, and I did them in a descending order like that because I didn't really notice Tyler the Creator as you know a artist to really take that serious until I started to notice his influence on other people through the internet, through Frank Ocean, because Frank Ocean has even worked with Jay-Z. The internet is a group of people, is a separate group, separate from Tyler's group, that has essentially used him as a springboard to make their own sound, right? And it can be hard at times to work with people and not sound like them, right? Because with Tyler the Creator, he's ridiculous. He just talks about his stuff that he's just an attention fiend. Um, so you tend to get worried when you hear that he has people who respect him as a person and stuff. You don't want them to carry that habit with them, right? And then when you see that they don't, then you really begin to appreciate them as artists, because then you're like, wow, you could deal with all that and still, like, get something done. And it's like, yeah. um and Frank Ocean, I had to isolate him because of the fact that he's taking a very essentially dominant role as a solo act, right? In the sense that you got group, like Tyler Creator has a huge network of friends, right? These people relate to Tyler in many different ways, so we have to use music to categorize and distinguish these people. Um, and even then, Tyler has people around him like Earl Sweatshirt, Damo Genesis, Haji Beats, Left Brain, just a whole bunch of people around him that he's working with, like Jasper too. Taco isn't really music. He's more or less one of those people that's just in the group. You know what I mean? Like, he was there before it was a group about, trying to be famous and all that stuff. Um, um, um. So you got all these people. It gets really really hard to stand out as an individual when you're talking about a group of people and everybody has a central person in common, right? And this guy is Tyler. So this is why I gave it to Frank Ocean as an independent act, because even though he will find himself more or less he will be overlooked sometimes or underestimated because of his solo-ness, right? Um, I still feels like, even with the penalty to his ability, right? He's still a useful, appreciated act, because um 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 it's very it's shaky ground to try to make a hold on the market when you are trying to appeal to people with a attribute of males that doesn't really popularize, right? Like, essentially, when you think of a male, you don't really think of them as a singer, right? So to try to appeal to a crowd as a singer, and your focus isn't on being intimate with females, eh, you know what I mean? And you could say a lot about him, but essentially, I feel like he deserved a spot. Even though it wasn't a good spot, he still got a spot. Um, I didn't put Joey Badass on there because, he got the whole pro era thing. He's like a lesser Tyler the Creator. I had to massacre his publicity because, essentially, his whole approach to things wasn't really, I didn't receive it as well because, when I look at Tyler is a source that happens unconsciously, right? You tend to see the lines that link Tyler and his group together without having to see him, making it obvious. He and I feel like that was the importance of him being a fool, right? The idea that he's not trying to get noticed as a leader. He's just saying, "Yo, look at me, I'm crazy." And if you stupid enough to focus on that rather than see the method behind it, right? You tend to lose yourself in the publicity aspect, right? Um 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 And the reason why Joey took shots is because, he's basically making it obvious that he wants to be looked at as the captain, the lieutenant, whatever you want to call it, of Pro Era. And when you have a lot of talent in your group, that you can get away with that. But when you look at the Pro Era, his group is really rather small if you consider talent a distinguishing feature. You know what I mean? And that just kills the value that he has, because if a lot of your people aren't really that good, then you trying to say big props for me being the linchpin and all that stuff isn't really it's not really identifiable. My girl Honey Soldier, man, this chick, I found her on YouTube, man. Yo, the reason why I even put her on the list is because when I saw her video, right, she made this one music video and she did it right. She did everything right. I said, wow, she actually made being a college kid work, right? You know what I mean? Like, I could tell she a college kid, or she was. I don't know what she's doing now. Anyway, she basically did a miracle and made the whole the college attitude in its purest form, right? Without the stereotypes and all of the other stuff it needs to bolster its image. She basically made pure college life, cool, right? The idea that if you have a lot of friends and you bump it, let's make a video, and it actually come out pretty cool, right? So, I say, well, I hope this person makes it, you know what I mean? And, the last thing I seen from her showed a decrease in attention to essentially detail, right? Because when she did it the first time, she did it right. She did it the second time, she started lacking in areas. Like for one, her setting video was incorrect. She had the atmosphere was correct. She always has the people. It's just the app. I didn't like the setting because um on a critique note, right? Now, this shouldn't usually be involving critiquing people. This is what you would call positive critiquing, right? Um, I felt like if she had incorporated a more open environment, right? And like you can always get a feel from an outside versus an inside environment. Outside environment, true, it takes a lot more effort. It takes a lot more essentially planning, but the whole process of making a music video is accomplishing this anyway, so I didn't see the reason to not just bump it, just do it, just figure out how to get everything to work in an outside environment, and I feel like that really killed her progression, because when she content wise, she wasn't really making a lot to begin with, even though if you're talking about dealing with a video, well, not a video, when your product automatically starts off well, that's not easy. That's not easy to do anyway, to reproduce it. Um, um. So she definitely had to struggle there, and so when I see this, I'm like, I can't get mad because I liked it. It just wasn't perfect like the other one. You know what I mean? So you can take it as you will. Now this last cat, man, this freaking clown, man. Some little punk ass kid named Bishop Nuru, man. He basically did a collab album with MF Doom called Nerubian Doom, right? With the album art and with production that obviously was done by MF Doom, the album was terrible. It's like if you got Jay-Z, right, to basically write your hooks, use his right, get people to do your instrumentals, and all you gotta do is put a couple of verses and you got an album, and it still tanks. It don't even sell 1,000 copies. You know what I mean? And for a Jay-Z collab, that's crazy. You know what I mean? That's like you really gotta be a terrible artist for that to happen. This is how I interpreted it for MF Doom. He basically made MF Doom waste his time and probably his money, because I'm definitely a fan of MF Doom, so my expectations is high, like really high, like no, that's not going down like that. So when I see this, but I ain't see it. When I listen to this, I'm like, yo, what did they get this kid? Did they just pick this kid up off the street, or is this kid a cancer victim or something? Did he is he like on his? I don't get it. Like, what is the excuse for the lack of quality here? This is like air doo doo. You know what I mean? If you could ever smell what it is, that's how I felt when I listened to that. So I had to put him at the bottom of the list, and you know that the same logic that I use to find the people in order to make my top tier, I had to use similar logic to make my mid, and then I had to use the same logic to make my bottom tier, right? And the reason why I did it that way is because where people tend to veer off when they make these lists is that they just take their favorite artists and rank them, right? And it shouldn't be a ranking; it should be a essentially a tree, right? A totem pole or whatever. In my opinion, a pop idol tree, right? And the reason why you want it to be a pop idol tree is because you want it to make sense, right? You should have people at the bottom who have potential to grow, and you should have people at the top which show what happens when you reach that growth, right? And the middle people aren't more or less inconsequential, because they either at one point was already at the top, but we already know that they all started at the bottom, so that's why they ended up being consequential. Um, this wasn't really a favorite list of mine. Everybody was really an example. Now people was probably wondering why you ain't put guys on there like Nas, Biggie, Tupac, Kanye West, but I'm like, dog, I know what I'm doing. I made a program for this. Don't worry about it. But pretty much, yeah, man. I really wanted to get this whole pop idol thing across. Um, I was really struggling as to what I was gonna do for this day, so that's why I had to put so much work in because I'm already anticipating this to be late. Um, 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 but don't worry about it. It worked out. It's gonna work out. We pretty much made it. The takeout was easy, but now it's just a matter. I've been doing the original hours since like I just realized I'm already more than a month in. So yeah. But with that said, to wrap up the whole pop idol thing, pay attention, man. Just pay attention to when you say you want to be the best, man, because being the best is more than just being the best, and that's all I can say about that. And if you can't understand that, then don't try, man. Just be average and be safe, man. Um, on to supporters. Shout out to Juanita Hooper, Shamia Skinner, Chris Vasquez, and my mans at the mall. Shout out to all my anonymous patrons. You are my statistical data, or whatever you want to call it. You help me determine how I'm supposed to grow, how I'm supposed to get better. Word, word. And I have no choice but to pay attention, because if I don't, then what's the point, right? You know what I mean? What's the point of saying you want to be the best? You want to be the best Pokemon trainers, and you can't even keep a list of all your accomplishments and all that stuff. But that's neither here nor there. Enjoy this break. I know I will, because this break is the reason why everything is off. Oh man, what the hell? You ain't got shit a whole lot. Just enjoy the break. I'll be back to take out in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the Tech Hour. And as you know, the poison of choice is tech. And this poison that we'll be talking about today is one of a particularly heinous quality, right? Well, a heinous quality, but heinous is a more accurate pronunciation to dictate or to get across the idea of the attitude behind it, and that would be the the cable internet versus the Wi-Fi internet, right? Now we tend to think that, what are you talking about, Moth? All internet is cable. All internet is not cable. Um, and my first exhibit for this will be your smartphones. Clearly, I mean, clearly there are no cables to it, and yet it has internet access, right? And as such, as the most widespread example of Wi-Fi internet, you can understand how exasperated I am to talk about this. Basically, cable internet is a example of essentially primitive architecture, right? You know, the whole idea that you need a phone line and a cable guy, right? And you know that may work for you. If that floats your boat, dude, then do it. But mm, it's sad to say that you know when the truth is so close that you can essentially hold it, right? It kind of gets annoying to to be told. Well, it's not to be told essentially, but when people offer you an insult such as a home internet network, right? Which in reality is not even a home internet network. It's more or less it's dial-up through a router, right? And the reason why it's dial-up through a router is because if you have to get it to me through a cable, it's dial-up. I don't care what you call it. You can call it fiber, you can call it whatever. It's dial-up. If you can't shoot it to me from anywhere, it's dial-up. And that's just my opinion on that. I mean, I hate to sound like a spoiled child, but come on. You can't just expect me to ignore the obviousness of this, right? The whole idea that the internet has blown up, and yet you people still use internet connections. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some really decent dial-up connections out there, but you know, like I said, I don't see a lot of I don't think they have a million foot modem extension wire or something like that. So this so-called high-speed internet that you're offering me with the idea that I carry walls around with me or something, it's not gonna work. And the reason why I've even gotten into this because I have to call it monopoly. The monopoly on internet is sickening. It's sickening because it's like TV all over again, right? When TV was starting to get good, prices went up. When TV started to get trash, prices went down. When the phone was popular, prices went up. You started seeing things like the contract and all of this other stuff that you didn't get back in the day because there was no contract. There was nothing you could convince a person of buying with a phone service that would get them to get a contract. Get a home phone if you don't pay the bill. Eat me. You know what I mean? And that's it, man. So you can see how it's easy for me to start to throw a little tantrum when I see that internet gets offered in these home packages, right? These home packages that are so unrelatable that it makes no sense. If I have a smartphone, why do I need a home phone, right? And if I have a smartphone, why do I need cable? By definition, a smartphone implies that I get out of the house, right? And if that's the case, then why do I need this dial-up package that you're trying to throw in as a added bonus? Wink, 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 wink. Added bonus. Whatever that means. And it just becomes a obvious factor that internet is clearly being extorted. I mean, mm, you when you tell me that you can't offer me a Wi-Fi service, at least a Wi-Fi service that is unlimited, right? You really start irking me. Like you really start irking me because it's basically like saying I don't want to offer you a Wi-Fi service, but you're still gonna pay for an internet service. But when I was just using it for my phone, you didn't have a problem offering me unlimited. What happened, compadre? And mm, it's just those types of loopholes, man, that tend to you know, just bring out the worst in people. Because the idea is this, right? The Wi-Fi internet at its greatest in terms of coverage, right? It's not the best in the market in terms of sheer quality, right? If you're talking about how fast is fast gets, then obviously not. But at the same time, if fast only gets fast when you're surrounded by four walls, it's not really fast, is it? You know what I mean? Like on it's like internet forgot this was the smartphone era, but it didn't. But it did because it's still trying to sell people dial-up. In which case you ask, do you know you're this stupid, or uh, and that's just a terrible lesson to learn, right? The idea that you they will when you talking about mobility, man, and technology gets stupid, man. It gets so stupid that you start to lose that hope that it's technology at all. And why you lose that hope is because it's supposed to be fast, right? Technology is supposed to be fast, right? And as such, a part in being fast, it has to adapt fast, right? A part of adapting is seeing things ahead of time. If you was planning on selling a multimedia device, a mobile multimedia device, why did it not occur to you to offer or to begin services which cater off this multimedia device? You know what I mean? And they exist, but realistically they don't exist. You know what I mean? Because nobody's going to pay the price of a home internet service for a low quality mobile service. You know what I mean? Like the price you would pay for 15 megabytes per second, you may get a few gigabytes, not a few hundred gigabytes, a few gigabytes of essentially mobile service, right? And this is just talking about storage. We're not talking about essentially the good stuff, right? The response times that you want so that you can essentially not take 15 minutes to see a web page load like the good old days, right? And when you don't get this, I don't know what to tell you. Huh. I don't know. I'm trying to keep an open mind about this, but I'm like, what more is there to say, man? What more could you really possibly say about this? I mean, it runs through a cable. You've already proved now they can run through the air. Run it through the air and start ripping cables out the wall, please. Please, for me, please. I don't feel like there's anybody that I can cater to that much, that importantly, that you would be like, no, cable internet is God. Cable internet is not God. By definition, God shouldn't need four walls to work. Um um that's about it, man. I don't even want to talk about this no more. I'm just gonna have to skip over to a new topic because this is stupid. Let's talk about AI versus adaptive programming. And the reason why I think this is interesting is for a lot. Most people used to get excited by the idea of AI, and nowadays it seems more or less that this essentially this hopefulness is gone, right? The idea that you will get truly responsive programs, right? Programs that are so responsive and makes you think like you're talking to yourself, right? Ah, good luck with that, man. And the reason why I say that is because the more invested you get in this code and stuff, the more essentially uh um the more depressing it gets because you realize that easy is not that easy. Frankly, easy is not easy at all. Um, and what that means is that if you write out a list of things that you will want a program to do, right? Take each of those categories and multiply it by at least, give or take, 100 lines of code, probably more close to 1,000 lines of code, right? And the idea behind this logic is that you know if you really wanted to do all of this stuff, and you wanted to do it right, you're going to need the extra code, right? And if you need the extra code, then it's not really AI anymore, right? Because you know the idea that AI is supposed to be able to think on its own, but by definition, a program can think on its own. It's just not creative. Mm-mm. But what that does open up is the idea of adaptive programming, right? And the idea behind adaptive programming is something that's a little more realistic, right? The idea that you can essentially plan for any situation in a variable environment. And talking about computers, of course, and code for this, right? And when you're talking about a world in which essentially coding is you know its own world, then it can make sense while writing rules for a already written world can actually work out, right? Because by definition, if I make a video game, it's already implied that there's a set amount of rules I want the player to do, right? Before it becomes what you would call breaking the game, right? So, there's that, and essentially a video game will only have a set amount of relevant things you can do to it anyway before you're essentially fluffing the game, right? Um And what you get though, if you do it right, what you get is a program so deviously detail oriented that it almost feels like AI, because it programs that can plan ahead are the symbol of the well written program, right? If a program cannot plan ahead, then it's not well written. You know what I mean? And the reason why it's not well written is because a well written program must be able to understand its variables as far as they are in the scope of the system, right? Meaning, if my object is Mega Man, I should know everything Mega Man can do on a controller, right? And if I know everything Mega Man can do on a controller, then making cheat codes, well, not really cheat codes, but you got these speed runs, right? And these speed run video games essentially take advantage of the video game logic, right? And essentially, it's like breaking them, but you're breaking them within the limits of why they can be broken. And what you then get is a essentially a rule set that is like that supersedes you know normal gaming logic, right? Like the idea that if you keep forcing interaction between two objects, you can essentially force a non-coded for action, right? Like for example, if they code for an object which opens naturally, right? If you know that a object like a door, right? If a door that opens when a certain amount of code, when a certain amount of code happens, then if it should follow then that if you continually try to force interaction with the door, right, it should let you through, right? And the reason why it should let you through is because the idea that the program will essentially realize that it's not allowed to come through, but it is allowed to come through, but it's not allowed to come through, but it is allowed to come. It realizes that it is possible for the objects to work and the game not to crash, and that's essentially how people end up getting through, right? The idea that you force the game into letting you force the game's logic on itself, right? The idea that um okay, this won't crash the game, but I'm supposed to not let you through. But if I let you through, you know what I mean. Um, 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 it's not necessarily breaking the rules because the rules later on say that I can let you through. So you see the logic here, right? Where adaptive programming comes into play is that it's supposed to work off this superset, right? This idea that people, you got these players that are basically will try to use old style tricks to beat this new game, right? And for the most part, they shouldn't work, right? But if they do work, that just means that you as the developer still has room to grow, right? Which is not the terrible. It's not a terrible thing to admit as a developer you have room to grow. I feel like it's worse when you got these developers. I feel like and we done it all. You ain't do it all, man. Um. mm, mm. And adaptive programming is more than just playing with invisible rules, right? Adaptive programming can take simplified rules and essentially make them stringent, right? The idea is that in order for victory to happen, these set amount of conditions will happen, right? And if you can plan for conditions that will happen, then you can already figure out how they won't happen, right? And what happens is you establish a logic that's absolute in terms of structure, right? Basically, you already know what is possible as far as these actions are concerned, so you follow these actions down their natural logical paths, and you arrive at either a crossroads or a ending, a destination, right? And the fun is when you get a crossroad, right? When you have an option to essentially plan for multiple hazards, right? And by planning for multiple hazards, your game is basically telling you it's written, bro. And when you don't have the opportunity to plan for multiple hazards, your game is probably not written too well, right? You can do this with programs too, but it's not a lot of programs that will really need this. But I feel like keeping that option open is always valuable. Uh, 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 mm, mm, mm. What I really want to see with adaptive programming is essentially the building of what you would call repeatable structure, right? The idea that if you have a game with a lot of rules, a lot of simple rules, right, you essentially can combine these simple rules with complicated properties, right, like object properties. And then by doing this, you essentially create a game that will forever be able to be adapted, right? Because the idea is that all you have to do is add a few more rules, or better yet, it depending on how good your rule making is, add a lot more objects, a few more objects, really, because nowadays people's a fan of DLC. You add a few more objects for varying properties, and then boom, it's like a brand new game. Now, where the genius takes place is when you are able to apply this to programming, right? When you can essentially use a program's logic, right, to make programs that don't necessarily exist. And what that means is that a lot of times programs suffer from not being able to go to be personalized, right? And what that means is that we all have our navigational tendencies. These navigational tendencies tend to determine why things take long or they don't take long, or what's your idea of why it is taking long. How could you make it go sooner, and yada yada yada. And in terms of an efficiency thing, I feel like it works out because if I can explain to the computer what I want it to do as far as what it's already doing, then I'm not necessarily writing new code. I'm just creating a new program, an adaptive program, really, because the idea is that all I'm doing is reusing strings that's already been created, right? Um, and I feel like that's a feature that everybody needs to get down with, man. Like, you people talk open source. Open source don't mean nothing if it's not already in a product, right? Why do I care about open source for something that's not a product? You know what I mean? Now, this may sound like a problem, but in reality, it's not really a problem because you know how licensing and all that stuff goes. If you're using somebody's code, you can't take ownership of it because you're technically. It's like if I let you use my Legos, right? And you use my Legos to make a model or something, and that model ends up making money. Well, you owe me some money because you made that model with my Legos. So, is that um And more or less, it is it's a rule of thumb to always uh essentially give credit where credit is due. So you don't really have to argue about who owns what, because it should already be established. Like when you have a let's say you have a Java program, right? A JavaScript program, and you have these JavaScript shortcuts. Part of JavaScript shortcuts is to basically say like, hey, I know you kind of suck at this, so I'm gonna help you out. So you shouldn't get mad if they a part of the JavaScript shortcuts they put a auto generation in, which basically says the original author of this program is so and so. And you also can't get mad if you can't erase it, because by definition that's just them using the logic that they want you to use, the idea that you are borrowing something, right? And if part of borrowing something is imply that you're returning. Um, Now, what this actually means for development, I'll never know, because development is really, really quirky, man. It has a tendency of basically saying that we're making progress, just not anytime soon. Now, if real AI could be done, right, how would it be done? That's the real question, right? If we don't want to take a restrictive approach, right? The idea that if I wanted people to be able to be creative, like if I wanted to bring Minecraft to code, how could I do that, right? Um, Let me think about this for a second. If a condition is not already planned or specified, you run a risk of essentially telling the computer some bull. To be honest with you, in which case, depending on what you're trying to write for, you could essentially damage your system, or you could essentially erase something that's already in place. You know what I mean? Thinking that you made a better one about a product. Like, just a lot of dumb stuff could happen. But in a open environment, how open can the environment really be? You know what I mean? This was the whole problem of AI, because logic repeats itself, especially when you're talking about computers. So you may think you're doing something new. You're probably not doing something new though. And I feel like this message got across when we realized that it's a lot of languages out here, man. Like a lot of programming languages, and they really all are saying the same thing. To be honest with you, I mean they all have to interact with a base OS system, regardless of who the OS system is written by. Because the idea is that even those OSs are based on a common design, right? The whole idea that you are essentially running commands, right? Not commands, but you're making a computer use that little computer chip brain it got, right? So even if you write your stuff differently, you're still running the same stuff on the same little circuit chip brain. So you're not really doing nothing too different, especially if you're talking about languages, which is branching off of this little tidbit of knowledge here. Um, let me see. If I wanted to write AI, how would I write it, right? Let me see. Um, Well, the first thing you gotta ask yourself is purpose, right? What is the purpose for writing this AI? All AI is supposed to be for a purpose. So let's say I want a friend, right? I want this AI to be my friend, and every time I respond to it, I want to feel like I'm talking to somebody, right? Well, okay then. Um, we already know that the AI has to be framed around, you know, saying something that's related to, you know, what you what you feel about yourself, right? Um, this is already adapted programming in theory, but you know, it won't know what you're asking. It just knows you'll ask something, right? So I guess you would essentially need a translator, right? Something to explain to the computer on a variable level what you're talking about. And you know, this is where things get complicated, right? Because let's say I wrote a program, right? And it took your synthesis on a purely numerical standpoint, right? And how it breaks this numerical system down is essentially by assigning a value to every word in the human dictionary, right? So you start off assigning a value to every human word in the dictionary, right? Computer then takes these values and creates this is what things get crazy. It takes these values and creates responses to them. Every single combination of numerical uh, essentially combinations, right? Um at this point we're already talking crazy because even if you could get the library for every single word, right? Creating responses for all of this stuff is yeah, you gonna make me lie to you and be like, give me I need a minimum amount of string characters before I'll even answer. You know what I mean? Because I don't want you just saying stupid stuff to me and being like booty, 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 and just to see what I say, right? Um, that's retarded. I guess a more easier way to do this would be able to take this numerical guide, right, and to basically rearrange it, right? So essentially answer your question with a question, right, to establish what we're talking about. Even then I would take I still terrible amount of programming. We're talking about hours and hours. We need a whole monkey. We need a whole team of monkeys, man. Um, and the reason why we need a whole team of monkeys because you gonna spend a lot of sleepless nights writing the same stuff over and over again. And the whole point of this is you want to get to a point where you make some sort of decent sense, right? There's no point of writing AI programming if it doesn't at least make sense. It may not be the most efficient, but at least got to start making sense, right? So once we get to a commonsensical basis and the computer is able to ask you questions that make sense to what you just said to it, and I guess we can get a little more complicated, right? Hopefully we got enough room for all of this. Um, once you have these questions, you can break down a yes or no response, right? This is like I said, this is like a very bare bones, stupid simplified because the idea is that it shouldn't need to verify. It should just be able to answer you. But like I said, AI versus adaptive programming is a thin line, right? So you make the computer ask you yes or no questions, and depending on your answer, hopefully it's yes or no, because otherwise the computer's going to be sitting there until you say yes or no. Any other response is going to automatically be queried as to a non-response. Mm, mm, mm. And then once you get a yes or a no, now the computer has to do a whole bunch of hard thinking again. Okay, he asked me, do you think I look pretty? The computer had to ask him again, did you ask me, do you think I look pretty? And then you say yes. Say yes. So now the computer's like, how do I lie to this bastard? Um, 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 uh, you know what I mean? Because the idea is that if you keep asking the same question over and over again, right? Will the computer give you the same answer over and over again? And this is where programming gets really sloppy. You don't want to give it the same answer, but at the same time, you don't want to keep people from going home. You don't want to lock people in the office building until they figure out how to make this work. So, you got a dilemma here, right? Um, mm, 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 mm. How do I say to this poor bastard that he is pretty without sounding like poop? Hmm. You would have to essentially, in order to circumvent this problem, you would have to put in a personality program, right? And why you would put in a personality program is so to deal with essentially the jerks in the world who essentially like to take advantage of the computer for not being so bright, right? And how you take advantage of that is that basically you have to program emotion. A mad response is not really a mad response. It's just a series of conditions which create the property of mad for the computer, which then the computer accesses its mad database and gives you a response. And you just keep working backwards like that, man. If the computer you keep you have to every emotion you will feel as a human being, right? If you was in a room with another human being, you have to give it a personality. You have to give it actually a personality property. You then have to assign a database to this personality property, and then from this database orchestrate a relation to whatever this fool is talking about. So in the case of pretty, if he asks once, you give him a nice answer, right? A regular answer, sure, why not? If he asks twice, you tell him you just asked me that. If he asks you again, you tell him. Then the computer can get a lot of sarcastic, right? We can put a sarcastic program. You keep asking, right? You don't want to get mad, yeah. This is where human emotion allows the computer to get away, right? Because the idea is that a sarcasm doesn't have to be cute. It's pretty much a easily defense, right? It's nothing too complicated. It's not a brain science. So computers getting sarcastic for. If we get to the point where we like 10, 20, 30 responses at man, then the computer can get mad, right? Then we can go off on a tangent and really start getting offensive and stuff, right? And then by the time if this fool is really still persisting, right? If he I guess he really wants to see if he got his money's worth, right? At this point, the computer can decide, you know, I don't want to talk to you no more, and then it locks. Now, that type of behavior alone will probably sell a lot of units, right? If your computer could literally get pissed with you, right, and then lock, right, and even then that leads to even further programming because it can't lock for the same amount of time. It has to lock to show that it has uh, a repertoire for emotion, right? So you're talking about programming that's so separate, so useless on its own that you're now both where you're essentially you know keeping the system um what you call it. You've got the system essentially I don't even know how to say this. You've got the system essentially bogged down with all this additional memory it has to keep on because people said they wanted AI and they got AI, right? Now the good news is if you make it work, then you already pushed the era into the century into a tech crazy era because people wanna know how did you accomplish such a feat, right? Now the problem starts when you get these what I call these calculated disciples, right? And I call them calculated disciples because essentially I see the logic that they're using, right? The idea is that you keep bothering the program until you reach the limits of what the program is able to logic, right? And by reaching the end of the logic, you basically make the product useless, right? The idea that it's supposed to be this God-given invention to mankind that has made everything better, right? And how you do that is like I said, you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing it. And the idea, though, however, is that if you can anticipate this, you can essentially make a computer a person, right? The programming will be so convincing, right? And because of the computer having memory, the idea of memory is not of emotional memory is not it's not hard. It's just that if you're really encouraging somebody to argue with the computer, um, this then may encourage them to do bad things to the computer, right? They may throw it out the window. They may mess with the memory. They may damage it. They may do all types of crazy stuff to get back. Now, these on their own aren't a problem. The problem becomes when people are able to expose weaknesses in the essentially engineering of it, right? It makes all of that effort for nothing, which is probably the scary part, right? Then again, as much lack of effort as people put into programming nowadays, I don't really see the problem of it. But all in all, I feel like this could be a very useful essentially accomplishment, right? Because if you can make a computer act human, even with limited parameters, right? Well, not parameters. Let me not. Let me. I've heard that so many times today. Oh my god, I don't want to hear that no more. Um, with limited conditions, right? You essentially make the computer somewhat human, right? Not the most stand upish technology, but yeah, man, I feel like it's worth the effort because it's not like there are any challenges right now that anybody's worried about for technology accomplishing. To be honest with you, if they are, please tell me because I haven't heard anything. And the idea behind all of this is that you can essentially code for anything, right? If you can code the fickleness of a human being, you can code the world, man. That's just the truth. And in a world in which the computer is what we trust in, right? It's the only thing we won't argue with, right? You know, I feel like it's worth the effort. I mean, shoot, man. The computer has failed me so many times. I don't even know where to start. Then again, to be honest with you, the computer was really built to fail, right? The idea that since it's neither AI nor adaptive, um, it's not it doesn't really have a purpose. You know what I mean? By giving by trying to pursue AI or adaptive programming, you are essentially giving a old dog a new purpose, right? And this is really what the computer needs because I could call a computer stupid all day, but it won't make my day any better until the computer essentially responds back to me. Now, how much effort is put into this is what's really the holding us back, because the idea is that if you're not gonna put the effort into it, don't do it at all. This is not a child's video game. We talking about a device that's essentially like an electronic tag. You know what I mean? Um, and if you don't know Ted is a movie that actually turned out to be pretty successful despite the typical love interest being used to boast the profits and all of that other nonsense. Um, uh, mm, that's really all my thoughts on that. Um, Going back to the original topic, cable internet versus what you call an internet. You know, cable internet will forever be reliable, but Wi-Fi internet is the feeling of the future, right? The idea that if I'm using the internet should be able to be accessible without me needing to make it easy, right? And in the spirit of AI and adaptive programming, um, progressively more mobile and Wi-Fi sources is important, especially since you're expecting people to pay for these Wi-Fi sources. If a superior product exists, it should be endorsed. I don't feel like you should be having people waste their time on products that don't um, cater to the advancements of the century, right? And cable internet just happens to be that problem, right? It doesn't cater. Well, nobody's running uh cable internet like cable internet. Nobody's running cable TV no more. Everybody has dishes now. If you don't have a dish, you have Xfinity, which is essentially the same thing, right? Um, just it really is an insult to the times to have to see people with cable anything. To be honest with you, except power. It's probably the only thing in the cable that you should probably keep around for safety reasons and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm just gonna end this chat talk on that note. Shout out to my supporters. Shout out to Juanita Hooper. Shamir Skinner, Chris Vasquez, and my mans at the mall. Shout out to all my anonymous patrons. I hope this tech talk was useful to you. I hope it got your brains percolating and all that stuff. And with that said, stay tech savvy and have a good day.